Only here, TCU.
Welcome to Only Here. Only here, as in only here at TCU can you experience top-tier academics, game-changing research, big-time athletics, all on a campus with a small-town feel, but in a top-5 media market. I'm Chancellor Pullin. Join me for exclusive conversations with Horned Frog and community leaders. Hey everybody, today we have the head of Enrollment Management, Heath Einstein. Okay, Heath, we're knocking it out of the park here at TCU. We have the happiest students in the country. It seems like every single year. A lot's going right, and a lot of people sometimes say, why would you turn the dial? Why would you write a new strategic plan when everything is going so well? Just look around at our beautiful campus and our amazing students and the jobs they're getting, all these things. But in my estimation, and I'm really proud of our trustees, this is the perfect time to innovate, to dream anew on a very strong foundation. Because of that strength, we've got some really exciting growth objectives as it pertains to our student body. And so I want to get your take as it pertains to why, in an environment where the national number of traditional age college students is declining, what is it about TCU that gives you confidence that we can grow and grow at quality?
Yeah, it's a great question. And first of all, thank you for having me here. Love talking about enrollment, love talking about TCU. Every day is a great day to be at TCU, isn't it? I think we have some distinct advantages here at the university that will help us cut through some of that noise that's out there. And to be fair, this is an audacious ask, right? And I've heard you say that, and it's true. We're trying to grow at a time, as you say, not only when nationally do we have fewer students graduating from high school than we've had in a long, long time, and that trend is going to continue. We have a little bit of distrust in higher education right now, and there are lots of reasons for that. We have an economy that can make it difficult for some families to make the choice to either move on to college at all, and certainly to go to a college at the price point of TCU. And yet, despite those very real headwinds, popularity in our institution has never been higher. And so I agree that now is the time to step on the pedal and push the envelope a little bit. So let's tease that out. First of all, we had the housing bubble, 2008, 2009. Right. Economy goes south. People have fewer children. Unlike other periods in U.S. history when we saw some economic calamity, after the rebound in history, typically people had more children. That did not happen this time. So we're in a sustained period now of fewer students graduating from high school. That's not going to hit every college in quite the same way. There will be colleges, we've already seen this, we've seen some colleges either completely shut their doors. Right. We've seen mergers. The schools that are innovative, the schools that have a powerful brand, the schools that are able to attract students from all over the country, all over the world, and not just rely on their own region, those are the ones that are going to be able to thrive in this new environment. We have proven over the last 10 to 20 years that we are a place where people will travel, they will invest in ways that make a difference for their students, and we also know that no matter what's going on in the world, no matter what the economy looks like, there is still no surer way to financial freedom than getting a college degree. Right. And so our responsibility is to not just grow, but to grow in a way that's as inclusive as possible. Particularly here in Texas, because we have a growing population here, and we are Texas Christian University. But it really is inclusive of all students. So some of the investments that we have made in terms of how we're deploying our financial aid resources really speak just to that. Yeah.
That's excellent. Well, as I think about that strategic plan, and thank you for being a co-author of that plan along with 9,999 of our fellow frogs. It was, to use your word, a very inclusive process where everybody had a seat at the table and had a chance to put their fingerprints on it. One of my favorite things is that the first word in the plan is student. and rightly so. It always will be. Talk to us about the student-centered approach and why that will remain a part of who TCU is and what we are promising to our students and families.
Yeah. If you talk to folks who've been at TCU for a while, and you talk to them about this growth trajectory that we're on, some of them will, and I understand this, will express some reservations about that because they remember TCU as it is or as it was, and this commitment to student has always been central to our identity. And I have to remind them, I think we all have to remind them, when they got here, people were saying the same thing, right? When I got to TCU in 2012, we had an undergraduate student body that was around 8,500. Okay, we're now at about 11,000. That's already a big difference. Yeah. And I recall back then folks saying, maybe it's getting away from us. Right. I remember when we were 6,000. I remember when we were 5,500. And I think we've always been intentional about not just growing for growth's sake and not just growing, but growing with intentionality in terms of how we're supporting students with respect to faculty, staff, focusing on both teaching and research, and the research that brings our students into the lab space with our great faculty. So I think that's critically important. I'll also answer that question by looking at it through the lens of enrollment. Okay, we have always done things in a student-centered way, and let me give you an example of that. About 8 or 9 years ago, we were one of the first colleges in America to allow students to self-report their test scores. That seemed like a really bold idea at the time. How could we possibly let students tell us what their scores were without getting the official results from the testing agency? Wouldn't students just fabricate their scores? Well, no, they don't do that because the stakes are too high. They know if they got caught that's it. They would be out. And what we thought to ourselves at the time was, why would we force students to pay the College Board or ACT money if they may or may not end up at TCU, right? If you're a student in high school, you're applying to, let's say, 10 different colleges. Yep. If you have to pay for 10 different test scores, in reality, 9 of those payments are wasted. Right. So we said, allow students to self-report their scores. If in fact they end up coming to TCU, then we require the official result from the testing agency. That's a very student-centered way to look at one element of the admission process. So as we sort of flip this forward and look at what does student-centered mean as we move toward an undergraduate enrollment of 14,900, a graduate enrollment of 3,000, these are minimal numbers. Right. It's with that same mindset, that same frame of mind that we're going to carry forward. Yeah. Everything that we do, and I'm working with Kathy Caven-Stahl, our Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, in this first pillar of student-centered growth. And so it's not just about growing, but it's how are we doing it in a way that's going to ensure that our students will retain at a higher rate than ever before, will graduate at a higher rate than ever before, that we're bringing in higher quality students than ever before, that we're supporting all of their endeavors, whether those are in the classroom, studying abroad, playing a sport, or whatever those endeavors may be. It's all about that student experience. That's central to everything that happens here.
Yeah. Well, I know that and I feel that, but for people who are new to our community or taking a look at TCU for the first time, and it could be a prospective student, it could be a parent, they're saying, well, TCU is really known for having small class sizes. And a high percentage of our instructors are full-time, both teachers and scholars, and known for very holistic advising and career coaching and professional development. Is my student still going to be able to get an advising appointment? Will they still be learning from a well-prepared faculty member that cares deeply about them at the individual student level? Will the size put some of those things at risk? How would you respond to that?
I would say no. I mean, none of that is at risk. And this goes back to what I've heard you say, right? That as we grow, we're scaling all of those support structures, whether that is career advisors or academic advisors, all of those things that help make the TCU experience. You see, I think often when students are looking at TCU, they're trying to understand what it is that makes us distinctive about compared to other institutions. our value proposition cannot be compromised, because if we sacrifice that student to faculty ratio, that student to staff ratio, then everything that makes TCU goes away, and we're just another institution that's got a lot of students and maybe plays some great football on Saturdays. But it's nothing that we can go out and say, this is why you should invest on the uniqueness of this particular experience at this particular time.
Yeah, I love that. And I know part of that is on the back of incredible philanthropic support from our alumni and parents and other friends of the university. You know, the last capital campaign we completed was $1 billion capital campaign. It's one of the largest capital campaigns of its kind for any school, public or private, of our size, certainly. And the biggest component of how those philanthropic funds are being invested is directly into students, and a lot of times that's in terms of financial aid. And so as we continue to pursue the excellence that we see in the classroom and the laboratories and the performance halls, we also want to make sure that education at TCU is accessible, or increasingly accessible. So it's your merit, it's your aptitude, it's the level of your ambition, it's your accomplishments as you start to apply for college that ought to drive whether or not you can come to TCU, not necessarily just the size of your bank account. Talk to us about our financial aid strategy, and then one of my favorite new programs, TCU for Texans. So bring us on that journey and why we think that's going to be such a game changer for our future.
Yeah. Well, look, the reality is that TCU's price point is not accessible to every student in this country. And so we have to have a financial aid program that allows students to at least see themselves here. We don't want the cost of attendance to automatically discount us from students' consideration. And so we have for a long time deployed a financial aid model that is a mixture of academic scholarship, an acknowledgement of what a student has been able to achieve through their high school years, as well as need-based financial aid, to the point that you're making, so that a student's bank account isn't the determinant as to whether they're coming to TCU. That doesn't cover everybody. We wish we could cover everybody. There are very few colleges out there who can both be need blind in their admission process, meaning they don't consider a student's financial ability when they're making an admission decision, and guarantees to meet 100% of a family's demonstrated need. Most colleges are forced to choose between those two. Maybe a dozen schools could do both of those things at the same time. So it's forced us to think really critically about how we deploy finite resources. What I love about this new TCU for Texans initiative is it's telling folks in our own backyard that if you are a family of certain means, certain limited means, then TCU will support you. And that means, to put some numbers on that, if your family has an AGI of roughly 70,000, that we are going to essentially fund your way to TCU if you can get in. And I think that's an important last little clause, because very often there is an assumption from people out there that if you're handing out the cost of attendance, it must mean you're just giving people some free money, and they haven't somehow earned their right to be here. What our goal is, and what our expectation is that by planting the flag in the ground and saying your finances aren't going to be the determinant, we're going to attract the highest caliber student in the state of Texas. Students who will have their pick of the litter from any college in the country, and they're going to choose TCU because of that value proposition we talked about earlier. And so those are students who likely would have gotten an academic scholarship anyway. So it's not like all of that money is newfound money. They would have had that money in the form of academic scholarship anyway. And it's an important point to drive home, because we don't want people conflating low income with low ability. Far from the truth. We have many examples of students on this campus right now, and students historically through the 150 plus years at TCU, who through the generosity of our donors have been able to make their way through the university, thrived, made significant contributions in society, and in turn gave back to the university. So this is our way of paying it forward as an institution.
Yeah, well, I love the program, and it does allow us to really attract the best and brightest. And the best and brightest, when curated and supported through our increasingly rigorous academic programs and our wraparound student success services, have the chance to be the leaders we need. And this is it's almost an autobiographical story for several members on our board of trustees. I think about Luther King, who came from a family of modest means and now is one of the great financiers in the country. I think about Barry Davis, same story, was able to come to TCU because of a scholarship, now is running a leading energy company. I think about Elliott Hill, who's the CEO of Nike, right? Who was the child of a single parent who chose the selfless professional sacrifice, at least from a wealth creation perspective, to be a public school teacher. And
we're sitting here in Hill Hall.
And we're sitting here in Hill Hall, right, in this collision space. And I want to talk about that later. But think about the fiduciary leaders of our university in the form of our board of trustees, whose career and life pathways were in no small part made possible through programs like this.
I think it's why the initiative has been universally embraced. As we hear from our current students, from our families, our donors, our board members, our prospective families. So as we're sitting here recording today, last night we had our Riff Ram Roadshow in Dallas, which is the Riff Ram Roadshow is an opportunity for us to travel around the country and engage with all of our stakeholders at one point, so it creates real synergy on campus between different campus partners. And I met a student named Danielle, who she introduced herself to me before the event, and we were chit-chatting a little bit and about the admission process. And after the event, because we talked about TCU for Texans, she came back to me with her parents. And she said, I think I might qualify for this. And she had this gleam in her eye. Wow. And that's what this is about. That's why we're doing this. So exciting.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. And one of my favorite things about this is not just the program and amazing conversations like that, but what that's going to mean for the future of our university, but how we're doing it by consistently adhering to our commitment to values. And there have been a lot of articles recently about values-driven organizations, and as that applies to higher education, I can't think of another institution that is so committed to and acts upon its values in every dimension. Why do you think values and alignment with the institution and what students and families are looking for is so important in today's higher education world?
It's a great question, and you're starting to see this bifurcation in our country when it comes to higher ed and the types of institutions that students are looking at, and I think values is a big part of that, and I think it has to do with, this is speculation on my part, I think it has to do with this yearning to understand a really complex world. You look around what's happening in our country, around the world, there's a lot of division, and that division is in some cases played out on college campuses. It's played out a little bit differently here at TCU. And in fact, I was meeting with a student earlier today. We had coffee, just wanted to catch up with him. He's a Chancellor Scholar, and I got to know him through the interview process for Chancellor Scholars a couple years ago. And we were talking about this issue. And he said, it's noticeably different here compared to where his friends go to college. That here people can engage in ideas that maybe they're not accustomed to being confronted with. But instead of attacking the person who's trying to deliver the message, they're attempting to attack the idea.
Right.
They're addressing it on its merits. They may be accepting it, they may be rejecting it, but there's no sort of ad hominem behind it saying, well, you're an evil person because you proposed this idea. We all, as a society, have a lot to learn from that. And I think TCU has an opportunity, therefore, because of these core values, because of our excellence, because of our engagement, because of our community, because of our integrity, to be a model for the rest of the world, for the rest of higher education, and really for the rest of the world, because our students, when they finish here, they're taking those experiences, bringing it to bear in their own lives, professionally and personally, for the duration.
Yeah, and I think that's important because part of maybe the ultimate instrument of our impact is where our students go as college graduates. Mm-hmm. The organizations they lead, the communities they invest in. And how they contribute to the flourishing of society even through challenging times. So that's kind of the long-term strategic play through our values. But I know a lot of students, and you know this even better than I do, even though I'm still teaching every year and love being in the classroom, so I have my finger on the pulse of the student voice, is that student experience.
Yeah.
And so I'm reading a lot about kind of vibey universities, right?
Yeah.
And so kind of this intersection between values and vibes. So if the values is how we prepare for the long term, talk about the short term, sort of the vibey nature of what a student could experience here at TCU.
Yeah. We hear this a lot too when we're encountering students in their high schools or when they're visiting campus. They're starting to look for a particular kind of school. It touches on what we were talking about before, and I think you're right, that's sort of the long-term piece of it. But in the short run, they're looking for a place where they can have it all.
Yeah.
Right? They don't have to sacrifice anything. They can have the fun football experience and all that. But they're also able to really dig in academically. They're able to engage in meaningful ways with the faculty. They feel very supported by all of the services that we provide. And that all of it is done in this sort of collaborative way, right? That they're looking for collaboration, not cutthroat. They're looking for community, not division. Mm-hmm. So they come to a place like TCU, and that is abundant in spades. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I remember the first time I came to TCU. I had never had an experience with the university before. I visited as an adult, so I didn't go to TCU. I didn't know people who went to TCU, but I visited for the first time, and it was really clear to me how much people cared deeply about one another here. So now I'm putting my, almost 50-year-old head on a 17-year-old body. And I think the students are looking for a lot of those same things. And it is in some ways just a feeling. I mean, we think about like the search for a college as having, the use of two really important organs. And I remember Phil Hartman, who used to be the dean of the College of Science and Engineering, he would say this. He would say, you use this organ and you use this organ, and you can do all the cost benefit analysis that you want. But on some level, it's just a feel that you have. And so when our students come here, I think they just get it. Yeah. There is that feel. It's that vibe. So it's sometimes you can't put your finger on it exactly, but it is something that they're looking for. I think it has to do with community. I think it has to do with not feeling like you're going to be isolated through those 4 years. These are really for traditionally aged college students, 18 to 22, that's a really difficult time in their lives for a lot of them. They're starting to form identity, starting to understand who it is they are, what it is they care about. And if they come to an institution where they know that that's going to be nurtured, and we're going to be talking openly, and this speaks directly to the mission of the institution, I think that creates vibe right there.
Yeah, absolutely it does. And I'm very sensitive to that notion of how a place or a person makes you feel has everything to do with your success. Yeah. And if you think about the decision to go to college, right? Yeah. It's the place where you're learning and your mind's being opened. It's the place where you're being maybe prepared for your preferred professional pathway. It's the place where you're going to make some of the best memories of a lifetime, maybe the most enduring friendships for the rest of your years. It's the place that offers you the connectivity at every chapter as you build a career in the context of life as an alum. It could be even the place you meet your lifetime partner, and maybe, many of our kids, date and end up getting married and those kinds of things.
I just met someone at the Riff Ram Roadshow last night. I met a couple who've been married now for 25 or 30 years. They met at Frog Camp. So there you go.
Awesome, right?
Yeah, awesome.
And so a decision of such magnitude, it really has to feel right. And I think it's like many other, big decisions in life. Sometimes if you're shopping for a house, right, you may look at 20 of them, and then you drive up, and just the curb appeal alone goes, oh, I'm home. Or how you feel about someone else. That's, it's not like you're building an Excel spreadsheet with, 20 multi-factor analyses to get to, here's who I want to be with for the rest of my life. It's how someone makes you feel, and how a college can make you feel, I think is important enough to match the importance of that college decision.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think about this, again, I look at everything in admission terms, and we use a lot of numbers.
Yeah.
Right. So two big statistics in our world are admit rate, which is the percentage of students who are offered admission,
right,
and the yield, which is the percentage of students who accept our offer of admission. And without mentioning names, but if I think about who our chief competitors are, perhaps one school down I-30 and another down I-35, our admit rate is lower, which means we're more selective, and our yield is higher, which means we're more attractive to those students. That if a student is admitted, they're going to come here in many cases. It's part of why, by the way, I know that you're excited about the enrollment growth. That we have an opportunity, because we're denying students admission to the university who could very well come here and thrive. That why not open up that possibility to take to eat from the apple of TCU, so to speak, and we can do it in a way that doesn't sacrifice the academic integrity of the institution,
right?
Which is ultimately very important, right? We can't grow just for the sake of growth. We have to do it in a way that makes sense for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you, one of the, sometimes people ask me, okay, well, what's it like to be chancellor? What's your biggest surprise? Well, early on, one of the biggest surprises is how often I'm on the other end of a phone call. Kind of on the front end between maybe a disappointed, very talented student or a very strong family who is beside themselves because they weren't able to earn admission, and then on the other end I'm on the phone with all these amazing employers who are thirsting for the opportunity to hire frogs, and whether that's right here in Fort Worth or we're a majority out of state by admission university. So all the great cities in this country, we have employers that love to hire TCU students, but they'd rather hire 10 at a time, not 2 at a time.
Right.
And so we're kind of disappointing talent and opportunity on either end. And so that's why I'm so comfortable with growth, but it has to go deeper than that. You mentioned stats and numbers. If you look historically over the last 20 years, every time we've grown a little, we've gotten a little better.
Yeah.
And that's why if you look at the stats right now at TCU, we have record freshman to sophomore retention rates. We have record graduation rates. We have record percentage job placement. We have record starting salary. So many of our programs are at their historical peak in national rankings. And it's with scale comes the opportunity to pour even more resources into an increasingly talented and accomplished student body to be an even stronger and more influential part of the solution to the workforce needs, certainly here in Texas, but all over the country and in some cases the world.
I was in a meeting yesterday morning with academic leaders of the institution, deans, associate deans, the provost, and others. And it was to call it a brainstorming session would sound too loose because there was actually a lot of intentionality and planning in it. But it was sort of a starting point of proposing some new programs that are going to be out of this world. So as excited as I am for TCU in 2025, I cannot wait for 2030 and 2035 because this place is just skyrocketing.
Absolutely. And, and what I loved about what you said is, that commitment as we skyrocket, right? We're on the rocket ship,
Yeah.
The commitment to maintaining those student to faculty ratios and those staff to student ratios and making sure that the built environment is additive to the academic and the social experience. And, including right here in Hill Hall. We talked about Elliott Hill earlier and, the leadership he shows in the private sector on the board of trustees and then the generosity to bring yet another piece of infrastructure to life. Talk to us about, the room we're in, this collision space, the collision center, and some of our plans to make sure that we provide the tools to match the talent that we know is coming.
Yeah. So this collision space is situated in Hill Hall, one of two residence halls that opened up here on the east side of campus here in the fall. And this is a place where students come to collide, to have those ideas collide that we talked about earlier, that people who don't necessarily see the world in exactly the same place can come and live in the tension that is what allows all of us to grow.
Yeah. Right.
If we don't have that tension, then it's not really collision. Then we're sort of near each other, not bumping up against each other in the best way possible. And of course, we're on fall break right now.
Yep.
And we probably would have students around here who would be helping us with the production. Yeah, that's right. They would be making too much noise. But that's just one example of them, and there are countless of how we give students the real life experience here on campus that's going to prepare them, going to propel them for success out in the real world. I think about Roxo, right, and our student-run ad PR firm. That is an incredible opportunity for students to gain that real world experience, working with companies who perhaps don't have the resources to hire the big PR firms, but they want really high quality work.
Yep.
And they hire our students. It allows those companies to benefit, but it gives our students a set of deliverables that they put on their resume, and now they're super marketable when they go out into the real world.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of other examples like that. And I think, as I think about the growth of the institution, one of the things that I'm excited about is we're going to be growing both undergraduate and graduate. The ratio will remain roughly the same. And to me, that's part of the secret sauce of TCU. As you look at the other schools in those Power 4 athletic conferences, and who knows how many conferences there will eventually be, but
changes every day.
Changes every day. We'll be part of it no matter what. But what I like about that is if you look at who our peer and aspirant schools are, the schools we tend to compare ourselves to, or others, or students are comparing us to, those schools have ratios that are quite different from us, and so we're not having to sacrifice the student experience, which is core to everything. They're going to be able to go out and get jobs because of that experience that we give them here on campus, and we're going to have even a greater research profile at the same time. So I think that the way this plan has been constructed, with such intentionality, with thought leaders contributing from across all of our stakeholders, we're able to thread that needle really finely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I'm excited for the future. I'm glad that I get to live it with you and see this vision and our values put into action. So I'm going to put you on the spot for the last couple questions.
Sure.
As you know, I've got some high schoolers running around my house, a couple juniors, and they're starting to look at colleges, right? They're taking the SAT and the ACT, they're studying hard. They know the junior year is really important, kind of a fulcrum year in high school as it pertains to preparation for college. If they were with us here today and I gave you 2 minutes, pitch my kiddos TCU.
Okay, so I'll answer your question. And I'll give them the TCU spiel, right? The 30-second, the elevator pitch, but then why I think it may be even different for them.
Okay. Interesting.
So, we've talked about this before. I've heard you say it before. I've said it before for 13 years. I've been saying this, that TCU holds a unique position in the higher education ecosystem because on the one hand, you get the full college rah-rah experience with fraternities and sororities and hundreds of clubs and activities. If you want to be engaged in religious life, if you want to be engaged in music, if you want to go to football, whatever you want, you've got it here.
Yep.
But because of the that ratio that we spoke of earlier, you have the kind of connection with faculty that you rarely see at schools of our size. So you get the big and the small, and you have one of the great cities in America, fastest growing big city in America, all of that. And what I would say is a college town city, okay? Because most other cities that are our size, the size of Fort Worth, they feel like a city.
Right.
You know, a lot of high rises, it's very sort of urban, and that's not Fort Worth.
Right.
So I think that's different. Okay, now here's the difference for your children in particular. And that is, as I have spoken to literally hundreds of Fort Worth kids through the years who've come to TCU, because I used to recruit directly a lot of those schools and a lot of those students. What I have learned over time is that the Fort Worth of a TCU student is very different from the Fort Worth of a student who grew up going to high school here. Because I know from personal experience, having gone through the, when I was 17, 18 years old, I specifically chose a college that was 3,000 miles away from home. I did not want to go to school around the corner. And I think part of it was I didn't want college to be an extension of high school. And for students who are from Fort Worth, no matter if they went to a public school, private school, large, small, whatever zip code in Fort Worth they live in, TCU is different. You can have the complete college experience. You can get away without having to get on an airplane.
Yeah. Well, and certainly Fort Worth parents would love that.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
So, and we've got great schools and just a lot of talent right here in our midst of this little town of 1 million people.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay, good. Well, this podcast is it's called Only Here. We've talked a lot about special and different and largely unique components of the university, but I want to make it really personal for you. Like what's your Only Here moment? What's your lived experience that but for TCU you wouldn't have had?
Yeah. So I talked earlier about my first exposure to TCU when I came here, and I was just sucked in right away. I mean, hook, line, and sinker. I thought this was the great place. I think the moment that sort of crystallized it for me and for many others was the run to the national championship game. I'm a huge sports fan, big football fan, big college football fan, and to see our little school be able to compete on the highest stage was incredible. But the exact moment was the pep rally on Santa Monica Pier.
Oh, yeah.
Were you there?
I was there.
And I looked around in that sea of purple, and I thought, what other college of our size could have this kind of experience?
Yeah.
Only at TCU could we have the kind of student-centered approach to education that we have in this great city that we're so blessed to be a part of, and get to have that experience on the national stage. And there was such just love. I mean, everyone was just like hugging and singing, and to have the band out there, and it was just the coolest moment possible.
Yeah. It was so visual and powerful in the moment. And, for me, I actually share some, and it was one of my favorite memories being on that pier with thousands. And it just made me very assured that I know that TCU isn't just about 4 years as an undergrad or a couple of years as a grad student. I mean, TCU's for life. Yeah. And it's about changing lives, and in some cases saving lives, in other cases opening minds at every turn, and you get to do that for the rest of your days, not just 4 years or 2 years, but for 40 and 50 and 60 and on. And that's a special relationship, and that's part of our promise, and I think it's part of the value of investing in a TCU education.
Absolutely.
Well, good. Well, thank you for your time today. It's been a great discussion. Thank you for all you do, all your leadership to help us make this great place even greater.
Thank you.
More soon, right?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks a lot. Go Frogs.